Hey, Steve, we're ready whenever you are.
We're recording. Go.
Oh, good.
All right. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Welcome to Second Mod Oasis, Qabalah 101. Couple of disclaimers real quick. All right. Just reminding everybody, if you're not a dues paying member, a donation is always appreciated. Don't have to, the class is free. But if you can, $5 to $10 would help us keep our doors open, our store stocked, and our message still going out. So if you can, that's great. If you can't, that's all right too. We're glad you're here, and we're glad to share this time together. Other than that, let's see. Same one, right?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So tonight, or this evening, we're working on the path of Tav, or Tau, the administrative intelligence, which connects the path of Yesod to the path of Malkuth. There's a book, again, that I've brought up before, the Sefer Yetzirah, and it's just kind of got like one-liners for each of the 32 paths of wisdom. This one particularly, it says, directs all operations of the 7 planets and concurs therein, directing them in their own proper courses. Anybody got a guess on what that means? No? Okay. It's kind of odd, but for me, what that means, and this is, again, my opinion of that statement and my meditations on it. So it is not gospel in any means. But the first thing you think about is that the fact that we're dealing with the physical plane, we've got Malkuth, and it's linking up to Yesod, which is the element of subconsciousness or the astral plane, automatic consciousness. Self-consciousness, for me, what that statement means, it's basically the self-consciousness truly directs what the subconsciousness does. Basically through suggestion, through imprinting, our self-consciousness drives everything that we think that we have no control over, but we have a great control over that. It's really this self driving it. And hopefully at some point we entertain the idea of our super consciousness directing our self-consciousness is the whole pattern there. The subconsciousness does do most of the heavy lifting. It keeps our bodily functions all happening in a timely manner, from breathing to the heartbeat to the lymphs. There's so many things that our body's constantly doing that we aren't consciously directing. If we were trying to direct everything, we would be driving ourselves mad if we had to, even just to move our foot in order to walk. If we had to control every aspect of that, we would fall over in confusion because there's like a million things going on at once. But there are things that we can do to provide a level of control to our life, to provide a level of experience that we're desiring. And that is that's when it comes into the other aspect of the path of Tav. We start dealing with the aspect of the fact that it's associated with Saturn. It is Earth and Saturn. There's another path that does the same thing, which is Shin, and that is spirit and fire. This one is the planet Saturn and the sphere of the Earth, or the elements. So when we begin to set limits or fields of experience, we learn through those limits, using the same exact resources, yet focusing them. The energy seems vastly multiplied in effect, but really in all actuality, it's not. We kind of talked about, as children, we made things that blew up. a couple weeks back. It was in just one of our general discussions. We were talking about making fireworks or making like bombs or whatnot. You know, you can pour out a pile of gunpowder onto the table and light it. Yeah, it's kind of cool, you know, and it sparkles and it makes, you know, smoke and some fire. But if you pack that in a tube with packing and wadding and you create a container, that thing will blow a hole, you know, into the ground or whatever, wherever you put it in. So by using that same exact resource, it has a vastly different effect. And that happens in our consciousness. That's the same thing there. So by learning to use the pattern, the power of Saturn, which is associated with limitation, with containers, with everything that has to do with bounds, we can learn to direct that force at will to the desired ends. Okay, through harnessing and directing the energy at will, we begin to learn the rules of the playground, which happens to be our own fertile valley of consciousness. Learning to give purposeful direction to our subconscious mind. As conscious administrators, we literally create our own universe. This is our first step outside of Malkuth. And this very first step provides an excellent example and a method of doing that very thing, of ordering all of our life's activities in their proper bounds and limits. And believe it or not, we've been doing it our whole lives, whether we know it or not. We constantly give our, like if we don't like the way our life is at the moment, shit thing is we have to only blame ourselves, because we create our, there are some aspects that you can say are karmically impinged, or however you want to put it, I suppose. But for the most part, we create our own reality, and the outcomes of our life are due to the effort and the things we're choosing to input into our life. You know, if we continually say, I'm too tired, I'm too old, I'm too this, I'm too that, those are all signals. Those are all like negative self-talk, the same thing. These things are, you know, kind of becoming mainstream in everybody's thought and kind of self-help stuff, but it's because it's true. Those patterns that we put into, the patterns that we have in our mind consciously repeating over and over and over again, those are the things that our subconsciousness is picking up and running with. So it's, if you're saying you're too tired, believe it or not, tomorrow you're going to be too tired too. And the day after that, you're going to be even more tired because you were tired the next day, and so on and so on. Or, and it can go with health. It can go with the idea of lack, the idea of no money, the idea of, I don't have this. Well, I can't do that because I'm a convicted felon. I can't do this because I'm, you know, such and such. You know, there's so many things in our world that we create those containers, and those containers end up being negative in our life. They end up being, it's not even negative really, because those are the things that are going to teach us to learn. Those are going to, you know, I joked about it last week about the fact that we learn two ways, either from curiosity or through pain. And most of us aren't that curious, kind of intimating the fact that most of us learn more through pain and through suffering than we do through curiosity. Pain is a great motivator. It's a great reason for us to do something different in our life. And that fits right in with Saturn again. And so where else do we see this? But I found in the Gnostic Mass, priest says, Lord, most secret, bless this spiritual food unto our bodies, bestowing upon us health and wealth and joy and peace, and that fulfillment of will and of love under will, that is perpetual happiness. Right there, that line is an example of how we can organize the 7 planets in our bodies. Those aspects, they're aspects of consciousness. Each one of those lines corresponds to a planet, which thus also corresponds to a level of consciousness. The first one, bless the spiritual food, bestowing upon us health. Health has to do with Mercury. Wealth has to do with Jupiter, expansion, just everything that is benevolent, and abundance is another good reason, correspondence. And then for strength, we have Mars. Peace is Saturn. And that fulfillment of will is the sun. And of love under will, that's the moon. And that is perpetual happiness. That's the earth. And I just thought it was a really good example of that very statement of ordering all of the, let's see, sorry, the directs all operations of the 7 planets and concurs therein, directing them in their own proper courses. Okay, so these are examples of modes of consciousness that we can properly order in our life, and it's through setting the limits and working within the bounds of the physical realm that we can attain mastery over each one of these, and thus mastery over our life. I mean, in so many ways, we always think of these things as kind of outside and like, well, Mercury is this and that, but it really boils down to a level of consciousness. There are far greater and deeper meanings, but for me, I try to boil it down usually to how it affects me. Like literally, I can put some kind of association with all of the spheres on the tree of life. For me personally.
Well, and I find that as a magician, that like affecting change within yourself is one of the, the strongest and greatest playgrounds you could do with trying to increase your magical practice to figure out your will. Everything then just starts to line up.
Indeed.
Does anyone have any comments or questions?
Yeah, I just wanted to know what number path was this?
This is the 32nd path, right at the very bottom of the tree, connecting Melkuth to Yesod.
On the center.
Right on the center line, middle pillar.
Okay, so it's the one at the bottom, basically.
Yep, it's our first step out of Melkuth, out of the physical realm. It's our first into the darkness. And if you think about that, it's literally, it's exactly what we've been talking about. It's learning to function in the subconscious realm. You can, maybe even Nick can talk about how that aspect is. I mean, he does a lot of this Jungian style work, and the first place that we start dealing with is our mind. That's the first thing that we need to begin to get control of, start playing an active part, because so often we're driven by all of these things, whether they be like unconscious biasness, the way we think of things, and we think that it's just the way it is, and it's not really. It's because that's the way our programming is, and that's the way we see the world, because of all of these experiences in life that are molders. They have molded our psyche, and they've changed the way we perceive the world. And in Yesod, we have the opportunity to begin to start making those changes. We have those anytime we have the ability to start making those changes, but it's just symbolized on this path and going forward. So, anyone else?
Yeah.
Sure.
While I completely agree that, if it wasn't true that that we can affect change in our external world through the mind, then we wouldn't even be studying magic. There wouldn't be such thing as magic. And I agree with that principle, but I have a little bit of trouble with the idea that, and maybe this isn't what you meant to convey, but I wouldn't like the idea that everything that happens is a result of our internal process. I think that would only be true if we were dreaming all the time. There are definitely external limitations on what we can and can't do in society and with our bodies, that, you know, and we couldn't change it just by changing our attitude. But of course, changing an attitude goes a really long way toward unlocking all kinds of doors, but there's still walls in the real world. And not everything that happens to every living being is like a fault of their choices, or unless you chalk it up to them just being in the wrong place at the wrong time, which it happens, but it's not because they had the wrong attitude necessarily. That's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, cool. And I appreciate that. And yeah, that's not, there are external circumstances. There is things that are beyond our control, but the way we respond to those effects in our lives are completely of our own control. The way we
process or heal or you know, grow from traumatic experiences. I've had some very traumatic experiences, and some of them were definitely not any of my fault. But if I decided to stay a victim in those feelings and that trauma, I would just be in that space all the time. And I had to make a choice to move past that and figure out, you know, how to process what happened, how to let it go, and how to keep going forward and just keep doing what I need to do for me to be happy and for me to find my will, and make better choices to not allow certain people in my world that may be toxic, or allow myself to be in situations that are toxic, or just, you know, and set good boundaries and be a boundary person, because I wasn't. And all those things are things I can do to change from having had a bad experience. But it's the way that I move on from that experience that I feel like is kind of what we're trying to get at, maybe, I feel.
Yeah, Wendy, Thalima's not the secret, right? We don't believe that, oh, well, you got cancer, so you must have been thinking negatively or attracting cancer energy, or like, that's not how it works. And so if I hope that's not what you're taking away from what Dan was saying, because I don't think there's anybody here who believes that. Yeah. But like Vanessa was saying, you know, let's say, because, you know, we all know somebody who did all the right things and still ended up with some horrible disease, right? Or they were born with it and it was a genetic problem. But how you choose to react and what you do in response, like there are, you know, people who something bad will happen and they'll just never recover. They'll keep kind of wallowing in it and never really move on from that one thing. I mean, the only things I can think of as examples right now are sort of stereotype movie kind of characters. But like when my mom died from cancer in 2012, and when she got sick, she decided that, you know, she was going to live the rest of her life the best way that she could. And so instead of, I mean, some days sucked, but instead of sitting around and having a pity party 24/7, she decided like what she wanted to eat and who she wanted to see and what kinds of activities she wanted to do while she could still do them. And she really took control over living the best rest of her life that she could, versus sitting at home and feeling sorry for herself and just being like, oh, well, I'm going to die anyway, so what's the point?
Yeah, thank you so much. I really like what all three of you, Dan, Vanessa, and Makai, said in response to what I asked. Thank you.
Right.
Well, I wanted to throw in one. I mean, I totally agree. I think this doctrine or understanding put in the wrong hands could be, you know, marketed like The Secret and used by people who don't care as a way to beat people over the head with yet another stick of why everything that happens is your fault. Right. I totally agree with all of that and what everybody says, but I also want to throw in there that we're talking from the world of duality and how things appear in Malkuth, and that there is a part of the Qabalah that I believe that says, yeah, kind of like what Lon would say, there is no outside of yourself. So to say that we can control the fact that we got cancer, even if we didn't identify, or somebody dies and it's their fault. Absolutely not, as far as a practical thing to point out. But as a formula mathematically that makes the rest of it work, I think the Sefer Yetzirah is saying some pretty astounding things that we would really hate when we see it from the world of duality. So I don't even know if I'm making myself clear, but if we accept the ultimate of we are basically one creation that is experiencing itself over and over and over through a bunch of different monads, then at a level that we can't begin to comprehend, just to make the formula work out so the rest of it has practical application, it's kind of saying that.
Sorry, if I can add a little bit to that as well. I'm sorry, do you need to move on?
Yes, please.
Oh, okay. If I can add just a little bit too, just from that psychological perspective from Carl Jung, part of his whole idea was synchronicity, and the idea that psyche is not just in the brain. He said psyche isn't in us; we are in psyche. It's collective, and so it is all encompassing, and we're in the mix. And to the degree that we are in tune with that, we can adapt and respond. Like Kai was saying, it's not the secret out there, but it is very much the thing of being aware of what's going on, of seeing those synchronicities, of seeing those messages that are out there, and being able to respond. And when we do begin to form our will, we do start planting those seeds in our own unconscious, and our unconscious sits in the background and starts churning those things. I mean, I find them just in like doing research, and it's something I love to see happen, because I can be driving down the road, thinking of nothing, and then all of a sudden something that I have been working on, over weeks ago, boom. And that's the unconscious at work, because all that's been working in the background, and now it's going to come forward into consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what you're saying about making this link really is learning how to bring the unconscious into consciousness, and to work with psyche and be in tune. And as you're saying, bring our true will into the larger will and have it all work.
Yeah, it's like the reticular automating system, or whatever something brings into our consciousness, we're going to begin to start seeing these things over and over. The consciousness is amazing, and the power of subconsciousness is mind-blowing, really. So
I had a question.
Yeah.
I was wondering, like, how do you explore that? I mean, how do you, is it like through pathworking, meditation? Like, if I wanted to explore Yesod, like how does a person do that?
There's a lot of different ways, but what we're doing tonight is a path working on getting to Yesod. We won't enter Yesod. We're going to stay just on the path tonight, but in 2 weeks we'll enter Yesod. But in actuality, you can just start beginning to, there's different ways you can do path workings. You can begin to focus on repetitive patterns, whether that be through journaling, through experiences, just kind of documenting and noticing patterns in your life. That's really what it is. It's beginning to become conscious of the patterns in the world around you, which happens to be your world. So it begins with attention, basically, and intention. wanting to see the pattern, wanting to see the things that occur. You can start by also, you know, there is some level of like kind of secret styled things you can do. I mean, it does help to create like vision boards, to create things to where you focus on a specific aspect of something you want to change in your life, and you meditate on that. You can do it through tarot cards, is another great example. Getting ready for this week of this class, I meditated on the universe key all week long, and like for some pretty long meditations, and you just start noticing patterns, and you start noticing things that kind of come up. So use tarot, use path workings, and use your own questions. You'll start finding answers when you start asking questions. So best thing to do is hopefully like the beginning of the class, get curious before it gets painful. So
Yeah. Thank you.
cool. Right on.
Okay.
All right. So I know nobody can see this very well because most people are on phones. And I tried putting it in there last time. I just wanted to show, because it's the consciousness on the tree. The two that we're dealing with is sensation and automatic consciousness, and the path between them, the vice and the virtue, is slavery and dominion. So slavery and dominion, that seems kind of odd, but not really when you think about it in the aspect of what we've been talking about it. We can either be a slave to our current situations, or we can learn dominion by learning to control the thoughts in our brain, learning to control what we choose to put into our subconsciousness, learning to control the people around us, learning to control, basically putting all these these restrictions or these bounds, but they're not bonds that are like moral bonds. These are bonds that we create in order to maybe make a test, to try something new. It doesn't mean that we have to keep doing these things. We do something in order to, we build a container in order to fill it up to where we break it, and we need a new container to fill up and break that one. You know, you can do it. Crowley recommends trying to find your limitations, all of these things. What you're doing is finding literally the limitations in your mind, and more times than not, you find out that, holy shit, I went 10 times longer than I thought I could. Or maybe you weren't as good as you thought, but then you figured out, well, you learned that limitation right then. And so that's another example of what we can do in order to learn to function. We can push our thoughts, push our abilities, push our beliefs in a specific way. That's the part of Saturn coming into it. We're creating a bound and a limit, and then crushing that limit, creating a new one, crush that one. So that's what I wanted to say about that one. And then Steve was talking about this last time, and I just wanted to bring it up just because I like the glyphs. No real good reason. He was talking about a tree that was not with, that was in concentric circles. It's nothing different or anything. It just doesn't have paths. And if you could read it, it just has the levels of consciousness in here. I just included it because he talked about it last week, and I wanted to give an example of it. Or the week before. Makai's was last week. It was 2 weeks ago. But and this one, since we're talking about Saturn, I wanted to demonstrate where the glyphs of the planets come from. It's really just three units, and those basically create the planetary glyphs, either the sun, the moon, or death and corrosion. Mercury contains them all. The others are just combinations of two. It's kind of cool, and I thought that was interesting. And since we're working on Saturn, I thought it would be kind of cool to share. All right, now we're getting into like the minutia of the path. So the magical weapon is the pentacle or salt. A sickle is the weapon of Saturn itself. But pentacle is the earth side of that. The cross is another symbol. The point of a sword, tau, or triangle for a symbol of Saturn. The circle and the cross, like an equal armed cross, that is a definite symbol of earth. And the patent in the Gnostic Mass is an awesome example of a physical pentacle that we thus make divine, and then we consume it. And that's really what a pentacle is. The one on the left is John Dee's pentacle, which is way more intricate than the one on the right. The one on the right is out of Golden Dawn type pentacles. The one on the left shows all pairs of opposites, and like it really points out all the pairs of opposites, and you find it over and over again. But the simplified form does the same as well. I mean, you have everything the same way on the pentacle on the right as you do on the left. The one on the left has a lot more detail and a lot more, I guess, yeah, just a lot more to work with as far as exercising your brain and utilizing a greater vocabulary for the understanding of the magic you're working with. The pentacle is the body, the temple of the Holy Ghost. And that's from Crowley on page 95 in Magic and Theory and Practice. The pentacle, therefore, represents all that we are, the resultant of all that we had a tendency to be. Identical to the karma of man and his ledger, what debts he may have to pay and what is owed to him, when the payment will be taken, and instructions to read the karma of man. And that is the John Dee one that he was referencing to as that pentacle. To surrender all, to give up the bad and the good, Crowley asks, how can a magician give up all when he holds on to his virtues? Basically saying when that time comes, we need to let it all go when we cross that abyss. That is, we have to be willing to give up, you know, all of everything that's good about us, as well as everything that's not so good about us, or that is not acceptable, or whatever that might be, however you want to word that one. The magical instruments must be made before they can be destroyed. So the sacrifice that occurs when we go across that abyss, we have to be worthy to be sacrificed in order for it to be a worthy, to be a proper sacrifice. And that means is mastering the magical weapons. Again, these are representative of consciousness and how specific aspects of consciousness, again, in proper bounds and limits, and it's in a proper form and a proper way to work with it. We begin to develop these weapons, but these weapons are really aspects of consciousness. They're part of ourselves. Fashioned to a willed end, this is the task, this is the toil. Ascend from awareness and escape the upper air, will the development of one, the destruction of another. Be selective, infinite storehouse, universal consciousness. All right, so now we get busy with the 32nd path, the universe key, Atu 32, or Atu 21, path 32. So this was a comment in the back of the Thoth.
It's the attributions.
The attributions of the kind of their divinatory meanings, but I thought it was fitting still. Treat time and all conditions of event as servants of thy will, appointed to present to present the universe to thee in the form of thy plan, blessing and worship to the prophets of the lovely star. And blessing and worship to the prophet of the lovely star. Oh, I accidentally wrote that twice. Sorry about that. That was my extra editing afterwards. Sorry. The universe is
It's worth saying
glyph.
twice.
What's that?
It's worth saying twice.
Yeah, it is.
Extra emphasis.
That's right. The universe is a glyph that represents the manifestation of purpose, accomplished and ready to return. So that says a lot, really. I mean, that is the great work, the summum bonum. Everything is accomplished, and another example of that point to where we have to give it all away. We have to let it go. Once we've accomplished it, for the whole pattern to start all over again. And we'll talk about that here in another little bit here. But the universe is a glyph that represents the manifestation of the purpose accomplished and ready to return. The 20 cards between the two exhibit the work and the great work and its agents in various stages. The maiden in the card is representative of the final tetragrammaton, or the final letter of the tetragrammaton, hey final. And that is different from the old cards. The old cards it wasn't a female figure, it was hermaphrodite, and it was a kind of a darker, heavier card. Crowley changed this one to be specifically representative of the bride in Melkuth. That, yeah, and sorry, one second. Talking about the fact, in the old Aeon card, it is a darker and heavier, and Crowley he purposely made this one with brighter colors, brighter, just a new Aeon perspective, kind of. See, I think I had it in a note. I'll probably come up to that one and say it again too. But just basically a little bit happier. The old Aeon card was a more of a definite end, and this shows both the end and the beginning. The planet Saturn, the other thing that we can start looking at planet Saturn is it's Binah's representative. The first place Saturn occurs is obviously in Binah, and that's why I keep talking about Binah as well. But this is where it is the emissary of Binah, if you will, the paver of the way, at the same time, it is the highest high, and the element of earth is at the lowest low because it's above the abyss. And then we have the same element, or that same force, planetary force, represented below the abyss. In the wake world, when Lola enters the 32nd path with her fairy prince, and this is out of Kongson Pax, her HGA offers some sound advice for those on the initiatory path. He says, come on, this is only the servants' hall. Nearly everybody stays here all of their lives. And I said, kiss me. So he said, every step you take is only possible when you say that. Basically, for me, that talks about the fact that we have to be so longing to meet our holy guardian angel, that we have to be in a constant state of awe and a constant state of searching for that love, that communication with our higher self. That is what drives us forth out of that that discomfort, or that pain that we're learning from. That's our way out. Our desire for unification with our highest self, your holy guardian angel, the aspect of the best you that you can be, if you will, is another way. The cool thing about the glyph, the card itself was created out of basically trying to square the circle. And people have been trying to do this forever, even though it's supposedly now known as that it's not truly possible. But I kind of wanted to demonstrate what that meant, because the Vesica Pisces, if you look right here, this is a big Vesica Pisces in this card. And then I'll show you everything else in there too. But a Vesica is the place where two circles come together, and it's that central side. So you find that when you put two circles together, you get that crossover. So you've created three things right there out of two. Okay. Add another circle, and now you've created an eye. You've contained, yet again, that Vesica Pisces within another circle. Now you draw that first square around there. Okay, go ahead. And that's just containing those circles. And then from that, you draw circles from the Vesica Pisces out. And when you add the card in there, that's showing that this very card was created. And so many things are created using the idea of squaring the circle. There's sacred geometry all over the place. Jeff may be able to throw in some tidbits on that one, but it's found in cathedrals, it's found in painting, stained glass, everywhere, and in our card included. Crowley was a visionary, and Frida Harris was an amazing artist that put layers upon layers of symbolism in these cards. And this is just the first one we've utilized going up the tree. So.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would ever add is that, well, not even add, but validate is pretty much all of geometry is, and trigonometry is playing with circles. And all of projective geometry is that she used to get all those perspectives is either taking something from the outside and shoving it into a circle, or taking something from a circle and shoving it back onto the outside. So it's, yeah, it's all of it.
Oh, cool. No, thank you. All right. So now you can't talk about one card and not talk about the other one. You have a beginning and an ending. And when I talked earlier about the 20 cards in between, it was between the Fool and the Universe. And that Hebrew right there, Aleph Tav, spells Ata. And that is the word for essence. And its value is 401. So things to think about is the beginning and the end, the Alpha and the Omega. When we look at the tarot, we find balance and sometimes direction when we study a card. When we study one card, it automatically has you, if you study one, you should study the other. It balances it out. And this is a really good example of it. And another unique thing is Aleph is air, and what we're doing on the 32nd path, we are in the path of Tav, which is earth, but we're on our way to air. So it's kind of reversing that nature. It's kind of just minutia, but nonetheless, it is worthy to bring up. Okay, so now this is Tav or Tau spelled out, which is Tav Vav. Again, learning to like pictorially tell a story with what's presented. You know, maybe by creating the container where we exclude all but our holy guardian angel made manifest. We enjoy communication with our angel. The Hierophant is symbolic of that angel, of that inner hearing that we have. So learn to create, utilizing the tarot for a storyboard. You know, you could say it a bunch of different ways. The dissolution of everything gives you the guidance you need to hear it's hard to get away from what I view as the Hierophant is my holy guardian angel, and it's hard to step out of that one. But there's countless ways you can interpret this, and if anybody else has a different interpretation, please say so. If not, we'll keep going. It's still associated with Nefesh. Ben is the secret name in the world of Asya of this path. Ata, or thou, is Aleph Tav Hey. And the reason I'm bringing up Ata, leg, and alterations, those are just other words that also add up to 406. And you see how similar Ata and At are. Those are five points off of each other, and they represent similar things. Aleph Tav represents the essence. Aleph Tav Hey represents thou, but it also that is the thou that is within. That's the divine within. A lot of times you'll see it translated as thine. And you utilize that when you're doing a Kabbalistic cross, when you bring the light in from Kether. That's what you vibrate when you go to your forehead and say Ata for thine. You bringing that into you, the divine within you. What was that? May I have a comment? Okay. One second.
Is that Dimitri? Could you possibly unmute yourself? I don't have the capabilities right now.
Someone's in there, but we'll keep going.
Okay.
Okay. So 406. So those are them. The secret word's Ben. We're still dealing with the nefesh, or the animal soul, in between the goof. The nefesh is above it, and the goof is the physical realm. The nefesh is the the animalistic realm, if you will, or the
physiological.
Yeah, it's the part of the soul that it's the animal nature. Okay. So this during our path working, there's going to be a point where you're asked to display something. And what you're asked to display is a symbol of Earth and Saturn. You don't have to use this. If you have a better version of what you think Earth and Saturn look conjoined, that when you are asked to present it, do that. Otherwise, you can utilize that. It's very simply, it's the symbol of Earth mixed with the symbol of Saturn, and just kind of conjoin those two, because that is the path we're on. Saturn and Earth both are known for being cold and dry. The magical power is alchemy, geomancy, and the making of pentacles. Saturn works of malediction and death. Malediction is basically a curse, is one of the aspects of Saturn. A magical word or phrase uttered with intention of bringing about evil or destructive. Yes.
Is that kind of like the return of Saturn?
Yeah, I mean, not necessarily, but it's more, that's literally like, wishing ill on somebody. That is what malediction is. Doesn't mean you have to display that. Doesn't mean that it is, but there's a common thing when that Saturn can be up to. So.
Tricky Saturn.
All right. I think we're going to go ahead and start doing the.
That's just the works cited, just to get that out there.
Okay. All right. So I would recommend getting comfortable. Again, this is kind of a long one. And is there any questions before we start the pathworking? No?
All
Okay.
right.
So get comfortable in a relaxed seated position or laying down, whatever's best for you, whatever works for you and your scrying. However, but begin to calm yourself by taking a few deep breaths. Letting them become even. Breathe in for the same length of time. Hold for that same length of time. Then exhale for that same length of time. And stay empty for that same length of time. And then in breath again and repeat 3 or 4 times. So it begins to calm your nervous system. It begins to allow you to go inside. So behind the darkness of your closed eyelids, you begin to visualize the astral temple of the Sephira of Melkuth. As the journey begins, from the complete blackness, a dim light appears, which permits you to take in your surroundings. You are in the midst of the temple of Melkuth. The earthen brick walls, 10 in number, the ceiling of pure rock crystal, supported by vine-enriched oak. Black and white tiled floors, the sides of the central altar in the four Melkuth colors. The white top of the altar and the crystal bowl holding the sacred temple flame. Drawing near to the light, you intone the divine name, Adonai Hararetz. The altar flame flares brightly. And then you intone the names of those entities who are at home in this temple. The mighty archangel, Sandalphon, and the angelic host known as the Ashim, the souls of fire, who gather around all places of worship. The altar flame is illuminated by their dancing embers. Within the swirling clouds of incense, a figure appears in the east. Sandalphon, tall and dark-haired, appears in her robes of citrine, olive, russet, and black. She looks at you with the compassionate brown eyes. You salute her with the sign of the Enterer. She answers with the sign of silence. She speaks. You have entered the immeasurable region. This place is called Thora, the gate. It is the gate of justice, the gate of life, and the gate of death, the gate of tears and the gate of prayer. It is the gate of the Garden of Eden and the gate of the daughter of the mighty ones. By what symbol dost thou enter herein? By the symbol of Saturn and the symbol of Earth. You hold up your pentacle. I seek the path of Tao, the path of introspection. Facing the archangel across the light of the altar, you prepare for your journey into the 32nd path. Sandalphon turns towards the east, where there is a great archway of indigo stones, bearing on the keystone the letter Tau in brilliant white. Within the archway is a wooden door that had been previously obscured by the smoke of incense. The tarot card hangs like a veil in front of it. As you step forward, getting closer to the image of the universe, You notice it begins to brighten, begins to take on a deeper color, more rich, more alive. You take another step towards it, and you realize the light that is emanating out of the space between your eyebrows is what is illuminating the card of the universe. You take another step and it gets brighter, more tangible. The two-dimensional veil begins to take shape. It begins to have depth, begins to become three-dimensional. Taking another step, you can feel a shift in the cool air. The smell changes. The lights grow brighter. In the left corner of the card, you see the bull. The right corner of the bottom card, you see the lion. The upper left is the eagle. The upper right is the man. You step even closer. Now it seems as though it is an actual scene. It became all three dimensions. It looks as though you could walk for miles and miles into this space. You take one more step, breaking the plane with your left foot forward. All of a sudden, your leg feels heavy. It feels very hard to move, but it feels stable. It feels strong. You notice the change in your body, that change in consciousness. You step forward with your right leg, immediately feeling enlivened and rushed, inflamed. You now have dedication. You now have meaning, have purpose to move forward. That left leg will be drugged by the right leg. As soon as you take two steps in, you look up to the left and your brain begins to light on fire. Thinking thoughts that you've never thought before, watching the symbols, watching the space around you, watching the patterns. And then as your right arm passes the threshold, you feel that element of water. All inside of you, it is all around you. Your arm begins to feel as though it can fit in any spot, fill any mold. Now, you tie that all together with the light that is beaming from the eye that is right above you. There's a great eye. You notice the cosmic dancer. She's beautiful. There's stars all around her. 3 concentric circles surrounded by 72 other circles wrapping in them, reminding you of the Shemhamphorash. She's dancing with a beautiful snake, majestic in nature. There's no fear. There's no trepidation. You just want to move forward. It appears there's a sickle holding on to the snake, not cutting it, but holding it. There appears to be light radiating out of an eye just below the head of the man. After looking at it for a while, you realize that you're not sure if that light is emanating from all around and hitting that eye, or if that eye is the one that is radiating the light. You decide. As you step forward, you begin to see off in the distance a giant structure, a house of science. Intrigued, you move forward onto the path. And as you get to the sacred building of science, your eyes begin to have a telescopic or a microscopic view of the walls, watching all the patterns of the elements, how they tie together, how they work together, how hydrogen and oxygen bond together in order to make water. All of these are new mysteries. but they're there. They're always there. And once you've spent a little time in the house of science, you happen to look over to your right and notice a great pyramid. Not one, but three. Again, you decide to go that way. And as you're appreciating the beauty of the pyramids, the symmetry, there again, you realize the science behind it. Now the sun arises above one of the pyramids, and you begin to see a new landscape. The sun is at its zenith as you step up into a lush, flat river valley. There is a mountain range barely visible far to the north. Far to the south is a vast desert, but the valley you find yourself is rich from the silt deposited by the river. Close to the river, there are tall grasses, 5 to 6 feet high, which ring low-lying swampy areas. Away from the river, there are other grasses, wheat and barley, which are native to this area. Man-made canals feed water to the vast rich fields of grain. You are in the Fertile Crescent, the land between two rivers, the ancient civilization of Mesopotamia, the Cradle of Civilization. Before you lies the ancient city of Babylon. In the east is a mighty temple, a ziggurat, having the form of a terraced pyramid. As you get closer, you see a light falling from the sky. The light lands on the summit of the ziggurat and descends the steps that are carved into the front of the structure. As it descends, it begins to take on human shape. A feminine figure emerges from the light, walking down the steps of the temple. She bends back 4 sets of wings around herself. The wings transform into shimmering folds of a golden robe. On her head is a headdress crowned with 7 pairs of bull's horns, a symbol of royalty. You see dark hair framing the full olive-skinned face. Jewels of blue lapis adorn her clothing as the figure reaches the bottom of the temple. You realize that it is the great goddess Ishtar who stands before you. The radiance of the vision is overwhelming, but you soon realize that the goddess has come down from the heavens for a purpose. The goddess speaks. From the great above, I opened my ear to the great below. The husband of my sister has died. Gugalana, the great bull of heaven, husband of Erishkigal, has been killed. The bull of heaven who has propagated the stars has died. I have come to witness the funeral rites. I have come to offer sacrifice and ensure the fertility of the land. I go to the land of Aralu, the land of no return, the abode of darkness, to the house whose enterer goes not forth, to the road whence the wayfarer never returns, to the house whose inhabitants see no light. I will go to the land of Aralu to receive the knowledge of the underworld. The goddess fixes her eyes on you, questioning you why you are here. You hold up the talisman once again of Saturn and Earth. She shakes her head slightly, as if bemused by the bluster of a small child, and says, "So you wish to accompany me on this perilous journey? Are you certain?" You indicate that this is so. "Very well," Ishtar replies, "but remember that fear is failure. So be without fear. For those who tremble at the flame and at the flood and at the shadows of the air and the shades of the dead shall never enter the palace of the stars." The goddess takes your talisman into her hand and holds it for a few moments against her breast. As she does this, you see a halo of light hovering around it. After charging it, she hands it back to you, saying, "The talisman has been consecrated by the god Eh, Lord of earth and the great waters. It will protect you on this journey." The goddess takes your hand, and soon you are airborne, flying eastward over walled cities, marshy rivers, and vast fields of grain. Soon you arrive at a great stone palace in the mountains of the Kur, the peaks of the underworld. 2 gigantic winged bulls with human heads are carved in the columns on either side of the entrance. Silent stone sentinels brooding over the gateway of Uralu, the underworld. The goddess approaches the gate and you follow, always a few steps behind. She is met by 2 guards who bar her way with drawn swords. "Who are you?" asks one of the sentinels. "I am Ishtar, Queen of Heaven. On my way to the east to Gugalana, the bull of heaven has died, and I have come to witness the funeral rites. I seek the knowledge of the underworld, and I seek to replenish the cup that is empty. I seek the waters of life." The guard takes no notice of you, for you are protected by the consecrated talisman that you bear. Neti, the chief of the guards, replies, "Urshkigal, Queen of the Aralu, bids her sister to enter, but the Queen of Heaven must make a sacrifice at each gate. She must remove her royal garments. Let the holy priestess of heaven enter, with her head bowed low. The ways of the underworld are perfect. They are not to be questioned." The goddess agrees, and as Neti unbolts the first gate, she removes her golden horned crown and hands it to the second guard. Taking a lit torch from the wall just inside the gate, Neti, the gatekeeper, leads Ishtar down a dark tunnel of descending steps. You follow them. All of creation watches as Ishtar enters the gateway. All over the earth, fertility is suspended. The light from outside soon fades as you descend deeper and deeper into the tunnel. Neti leads silently on the darkness, and the darkness closes in. The goddess Ishtar follows resolutely behind him. The steps of the tunnel are rough, and you must feel the ground carefully with your feet to avoid stumbling. Ahead is another gate guarded by another armed sentinel. Neti tells Ishtar to remove her necklace of lapis beads. She does so and hands it to the sentinel, who unlocks the gate and moves aside. The 3 of you continue down an even darker and steeper tunnel. The ceiling seems to press in on you. Although you can't see it, at times you feel it against the top of your head. The path twists from one side to the other. You begin to wonder if taking this journey was such a good idea. A 3rd gate is ahead, barred by another of the underworld guardians. Ishtar is told to remove the double strand of lapis beads from her breast. She does so and hands it to the gatekeeper, who unbolts the gate and allows the 3 of you to pass. You enter the blackness of an even darker and steeper tunnel. You begin to lose your sense of direction and you quicken your pace to catch up, so you don't get hopelessly lost. The light of Neti's torch makes strange and sinister shadows appear on the tunnel walls. A 4th gate is ahead and another guardian bars the entrance. Ishtar is told to remove her golden breastplate. She does so and hands it to the sentinel, who opens the gate and permits you and your companions to enter. You descend into the darkness and obscurity. The light from Neti's torch is the only thing that keeps you moving more quickly now. You do not want to be left behind in this awful place. An odd thing happens. Voices from your past begin to whisper to you. You can't even tell where they're coming from. The voices try to rattle your nerves. They taunt you by pointing out your weaknesses and your limitations. They invoke memories of past events that you have tried to forget. They ridicule you for attempting this journey. They berate you for foolishly stirring things up. They implore you to be sensible and return to your normal everyday life. Go home, they cry. You clutch your protective talisman and try to ignore those voices. Ahead, your companions have reached the 5th gate. You hurry to catch up to them. Neti tells Ishtar to remove her gold bracelets. She does so and hands them to the waiting guard. The gate is unlocked and the journey continues. The voices assail you again, but the thought occurs to you that the voices are merely phantasms and echoes. They are the archetypes that have entrenched themselves into the comfortable niches within your own mind. There are established patterns and habits that do not wish to be disturbed or have their deceptions exposed. They do not want you to continue in this process of spiritual growth and risk upsetting their cherished positions of prominence within your psyche. But it is too late for their tricks. You are onto them now. You ignore the voices and press forward. The sixth gate is ahead, and another guardian steps from the shadows to bar the group's progress. Ishtar is told to hand over her lapis measuring rod and line. She gives it to the gatekeeper, who unfastens the door and permits you and your companions to pass. The blackness is so absolute that you wonder if you will ever see light again. The dark journey through the twisted rock seems to take forever. At length, you come to the seventh gate. Ishtar is asked to remove her golden robe and walk the rest of the way naked and humbled. Undaunted, the goddess hands her robes to the gatekeeper, and the small troop enters the final pathway into the underworld. Surprisingly, the final descent is no longer as dark as it was previously. The tunnel eventually levels off and widens into a cavern illuminated by several torches. At one point, you hear the dripping of water echoing through the chamber. The group crosses a stone bridge over a sluggish underground stream. A few steps more and you realize that you are in a great throne room in the heart of the underworld, facing the goddess Ereshkigal, the terrible queen of the dead. Assembled around the goddess are her attendants, the spirits of the dead. Shadows of strange beasts move across the walls. Behind the throne of the dark goddess is an assembly of beings, the Anuna, the judges of the dead. The goddess is frightful to look at. Her skin has taken on the pallor of a corpse. Her robes and hair are the color of dust. Her eyes hold the fury of an enraged beast. Seeing her sister Ishtar, her lips turn black with rage. "Why have you come to the mountains of Kur?" she asks. "Why have you come to my palace in Aralu? Do you wish to raise the dead? Would you deprive me of my servants? You already have the 7 holy Me, the sacred knowledge of the universe. What do you want of me?" "The bull of heaven has died. I wish to receive the Me of Aralu," the great goddess replies. "I desire the knowledge of the one underworld." "So be it." With a snarl, Ereshkigal strikes her sister dead and pins her to the wall. Her body hangs lifeless from a peg. Her body seems to shrivel before your eyes. Shocked and shaken, you grip the talisman tightly and close your eyes, wondering if you will meet the same fate. In that awful moment, you feel an upwelling of hate and other raw emotions. You hate Ereshkigal for what she has done. But almost as suddenly, you hear Ishtar's voice in your mind. "Do not hate my sister. She is only fulfilling the cosmic law. I came to the underworld of my own free will. Whenever knowledge or energy is exchanged, a sacrifice is always called for. I came to receive knowledge of this place. I came to behold my dark twin. I came to witness my own reflection. I came to face what most men run away from. Remember what I told you at the beginning of your journey." That's right, the voice of the goddess continues. That fear is failure, so be without fear. I am not the first nor the last of the gods who will make this journey. Many mortals will do so as well. This is the way of things. Remember that day cannot exist without night, and life cannot exist without death. The whiteness of heavens shines all the brighter for the blackness which is beneath. If you fear something, you only give it power over you. If you face something that you fear and recognize it for what it is, you give it balance. You restore equilibrium. Ishtar's words are comforting. An image flashes across your mind. You see the whole of Babylonia, the people in the walled cities, farmers and villagers, and even the plants and the animals lamenting the loss of their goddess. No children are born, no animals conceive, no plants develop fruit while she remains in Aralu. The servants petition the gods to intervene. The great god, the Lord of earth and the great waters, hears their pleas. The magician, the god of light and wisdom, fashioned two creatures from dirt and gave them the food of life and the water of life. He sends them swiftly into the underworld with a mission. Your talisman consecrated to begins to radiate with light. You open your eyes and behold Urshkagal writhing in pain. The two creatures sent by comfort the dark goddess in her suffering. Grateful, she promises to give the creatures anything they desire. They ask for the body of Ishtar, and Urshkagal, no longer enraged, gives it to them. Servants then sprinkle the food of life and the water of life on Ishtar's body. Before your eyes, the color returns to Ishtar's cheeks. Her withered body inflates with life. The great goddess stretches as if waking up from a deep sleep. You are overjoyed to see her alive again. Taking her hand, you prepare to depart the land of the dead. But as you both turn to leave, the Anuna, the judges of the dead, stop you. No one ascends from the underworld unmarked, they announce. If Ishtar wishes to leave, she must provide someone in her place. The goddess responds, Tammuz, my beloved, will take my place. Tammuz, the shepherd king, the god of vegetation. He will stay in the underworld for half the year, and the earth will be barren and cold. But he will return to the land of the living for half of the year. He will return to me in spring, and the earth will again become warm and bear fruit. So be it, declares the assembly of judges. Ishtar and her party begin to leave. Before you follow her, you decide that it would be appropriate to offer something of yourself as a type of sacrifice. The talisman in your hand radiates heat as if agreeing with your decision. It has served its purpose here, so you decide to leave it in the palace of Aralu as an offering to Urshkigal, who is one of the most maligned and misunderstood deities you have ever encountered. You place the talisman on an altar before the throne of the Dark Queen and thank her for granting you a glimpse of the underworld. The hard exterior of the cryptic goddess softens a bit. She appreciates your understanding. A guard leads Ishtar and her small entourage up the dark passage back to the surface. At each of the 7 gates, the goddess reinvests herself with her robes and regalia. By the time you reach the open sky, she has regained all of her former glory and seems taller and even more radiant than when you first looked on her. Her servants, who have been waiting faithfully by the gate of the palace, rejoice at her appearance. Even the flowers and trees seem revitalized by her presence. The great goddess takes your hand, and soon you are flying over the fields and the cities of the Fertile Crescent. When the goddess sets you down again, you are standing before the ziggurat, the temple of the great goddess in the city of Babylon. Your journey is at an end. Ishtar smiles at you fondly and brushes the fingers of her hand against your cheek. She thanks you for accompanying her and remaining faithfully at her side throughout her ordeal. You thank her as well, for she was not the only one transformed by this experience. The great goddess unfolds her 4 wings and ascends the steps of the ziggurat in a shaft of light. In a flash, she is gone. You turn to the west and retrace your steps across the valley. You return to the temple of Melkuth and step through the portal. The archangel Sandalphon seems relieved to see you. She seals the great wooden door behind you and covers it with the veil of the universe. The flame on the central altar is a welcome sight after such an arduous adventure. The great fireplace, fountain, stone censer, and oaken columns are a comforting sight. Standing before the altar, you partake of the sacred flame for a few moments before leaving the temple. Saying goodbye to Sandalphon, you salute her with the sign of projection. She answers with the sign of silence. You leave the temple of Melkuth and re-enter the terrestrial world. Well, and that's about it.
Thank you, Dan.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if there's any thoughts or experiences that were unique. Anybody wants to share or not? Liked or could have been different?